Stop. Before you watch another second of this video, I need you to answer one question. What are you? If you're Filipino, you've probably said, "I'm Asian" your entire life. You check the Asian box on forms. You're grouped with Chinese, Japanese, Koreans in demographic studies. You're told you're part of Asian culture. But what if I told you that's wrong? What if I told you that genetically, linguistically, and culturally, Filipinos are not Asian in the way we've been taught to believe? In 2021, a massive genetic study analyzed the DNA of over 2,300 Filipinos from across the archipelago. The researchers weren't looking to challenge Filipino identity. They were just mapping genetic diversity. But what they found shocked the scientific community. Filipino DNA doesn't cluster with East Asian populations like Chinese, Japanese, or Koreans. It doesn't even cluster with mainland Southeast Asians like Vietnamese or Thai. Filipino DNA clusters with Pacific Islanders, with Polynesians, with the indigenous peoples of Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australians. Not borrowed from, not influenced by, clusters with. Which means Filipinos aren't Asian who migrated to islands. We're Pacific Islanders who happen to live near Asia. And the evidence doesn't just come from DNA, it comes from linguistics, from anthropology, from archaeology, from cultural practices, from skeletal remains, from the shape of boats we built 3,000 years ago. In the next few minutes, I'm going to dismantle everything you were taught about Filipino identity. I'm going to show you the genetic proof, the migration maps, the linguistic connections, the archaeological evidence, and the colonial lie that convinced Filipinos we're something we're not. Because for 500 years, colonizers needed Filipinos to think we were just another group of Asians. Primitive, derivative, part of a larger mainland culture. Before we go further, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share this video with every Filipino who's been told they're Asian their whole life. And subscribe. But the DNA doesn't lie. And the truth is coming out. You're not Asian, you're Austronesian, you're Pacific Islander. You're from the oldest continuous maritime culture on Earth. And it's time you knew. The DNA bombshell, what the 2021 study revealed. Let's start with the hard science, DNA. The one thing that can't be faked, can't be colonized, can't be rewritten by history books. In 2021, researchers from the University of the Philippines, Uppsala University in Sweden, and Harvard published a groundbreaking study in the journal Nature. They analyzed the complete genomes of 2,300 Filipinos from 115 different ethnic groups across the entire Philippine archipelago. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, Palawan, remote islands, urban centers, indigenous groups, lowland populations. This wasn't a small sample. This was the most comprehensive genetic map of the Filipino population ever created. And when they compared Filipino DNA to populations around the world, something unexpected appeared. Filipino DNA does not cluster with East Asian populations. The Austronesian expansion, Filipinos, as the great voyagers, around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, long before recorded history, a group of people began one of the most remarkable migrations humanity has ever undertaken. They started in what is now Taiwan and the northern Philippines. They were seafaring people, master boat builders, expert navigators. They had developed outrigger canoe technology, boats with stabilizers that could cross open ocean. And they began to spread. East, west, south. By 3000 BC, they had reached the central Philippines and Indonesia. By 2000 BC, they had crossed the Indian Ocean and reached Madagascar, a journey of over 6,000 miles across open water. By 1500 BC, they had spread across Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu. By 1000 BC, they had reached Fiji and Western Polynesia. By 500 AD, they had colonized Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand, completing a migration that spanned half the Earth's circumference. This migration is called the Austronesian expansion, and geneticists now know it originated in Taiwan and the Philippines. Let me put this in perspective. While Europeans were still tribal groups, barely venturing beyond the Mediterranean, Austronesian peoples, Filipino ancestors, were crossing thousands of miles of open ocean, colonizing uninhabited islands, and establishing civilizations from Madagascar to Easter Island. The Polynesian navigators who settled Hawaii, their Filipino cousins, same ancestral DNA, same boat-building technology, same navigation systems. The Malagasy people of Madagascar who speak a language related to Filipino languages. They're descendants of Austronesian migrants who left from Borneo and the Philippines. The indigenous peoples of Taiwan. They're the closest genetic relatives Filipinos have, the source population from which both groups descended. This isn't a theory, this is established genetic fact, confirmed by dozens of studies over the past 20 years. Filipinos are not a branch off the Asian tree. We're part of a completely separate Pacific Islander family tree that happens to have one foot in Asia geographically. Comment below, I'm not Asian, I'm Austronesian. Here's the thing, Asian as a genetic category is almost meaningless. The genetic distance between a Filipino and a Chinese person is similar to the genetic distance between a Norwegian and a Saudi Arabian. Would you call a Norwegian and a Saudi Arabian the same race just because they're both from Eurasia? No. They're from completely different genetic populations. Same with Filipinos and Chinese. We live near each other geographically. But genetically, we're from different human migration waves separated by tens of thousands of years. The colonial label Asian erased this distinction. It made Filipinos think we're a derivative culture, that our languages, our customs, our identity came from China or mainland Southeast Asia. But the genetic evidence proves the opposite. Filipino culture didn't come from Asia. It developed independently as part of the Austronesian expansion. Physical appearance. Why Filipinos look Asian? Now let's address the elephant in the room. Physical appearance. Many Filipinos have features commonly associated with East Asians. Straight black hair, brown skin, epicanthic folds. The eyelid shape often called Asian eyes. So if Filipinos aren't genetically Asian, why do we look Asian? The answer is more complex than you think. First, not all Filipinos look East Asian. The Philippines has incredible physical diversity. Some Filipinos look Polynesian, broader builds, curlier hair, larger frames. Some Filipinos look Melanesian, darker skin, different facial structures. Some Filipinos look more Southeast Asian. Some look more East Asian. This diversity reflects genetic history. Filipinos are not a single homogeneous population. We're a mix of multiple ancient populations that migrated to and through the Philippines over tens of thousands of years. Second, some physical similarities between Filipinos and East Asians are due to shared ancient ancestry. Around 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, the ancestors of both Filipinos and East Asians were part of the same migration out of Africa. They split into different populations later, but they share some very ancient common ancestors. Third, and this is important, there has been some genetic mixing between Filipinos and East Asians over the past 2,000 to 3,000 years due to trade and migration. Chinese traders came to the Philippines for centuries. Some settled and married into local populations. This introduced some East Asian genetic markers into Filipino populations, especially in coastal trading centers. The 2021 genetic study quantified this. On average, Filipinos carry about 10 to 15% East Asian genetic markers. The other 85 to 90% is Austronesian. So yes, there's some Asian genetic influence, but it's a minor component, not the primary identity. Think of it this way. If someone is 85% Norwegian and 15% Italian, are they Italian? No. They're Norwegian with some Italian ancestry. Same with Filipinos. We're Austronesian Pacific Islanders with some East Asian genetic mixing. But colonization taught us to emphasize the 15% and ignore the 85%. That's the lie we're undoing. The Aeta, the purest Filipinos. If you want to see what original Filipinos looked like before any Asian genetic mixing, look at the Aeta. The Aeta, also called Agta, Ati, or Negrito peoples, are indigenous groups who live primarily in the mountains of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. They have dark skin, kinky or curly hair, and facial features distinct from lowland Filipinos. For years they've been marginalized, discriminated against, and treated as other by mainstream Filipino society. But here's the truth that will blow your mind. The Aeta are the original Filipinos. They're the descendants of the first modern humans who reached the Philippines 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. Genetic studies show that Aeta populations have the highest levels of ancient DNA in the Philippines. They have the least genetic mixing with East Asian populations. They represent what Filipinos looked like before Austronesian migrations and before any Chinese traders arrived. And guess what? The Aeta don't look East Asian at all. They look Melanesian. Like Papua New Guineans. Like Aboriginal Australians. Because that is what the original Pacific Islander populations looked like. Lowland Filipinos, the majority of the population today, are a mix of Aeta ancestry and later Austronesian migrations from Taiwan around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, plus some East Asian mixing from trade. But the Aeta preserved the original genetic lineage with minimal mixing. So when Filipinos discriminate against the Aeta and call them not really Filipino, they're doing the exact opposite of the truth. The Aeta are the most Filipino. Lowland Filipinos are the mixed version. This is uncomfortable for many Filipinos to hear, because it challenges the idea that lighter skin and East Asian features are more Filipino. But the genetics don't lie. The Aeta are our ancestors. They're what Filipinos looked like before mixing. And they're Pacific Islanders, Melanesian-featured, dark-skinned, original inhabitants. Respecting the Aeta isn't charity, it's recognizing the people who carry the purest form of our ancestral DNA. Why this matters for Filipino identity? So why does any of this matter? Why does it matter if Filipinos are called Asian or Pacific Islander or Austronesian? Because identity shapes how you see yourself and how the world sees you. For 500 years, Filipinos have been taught that we're a derivative culture, that our languages came from Sanskrit and Chinese, that our culture came from Malay and Indian influences, that we're a mixed-up population with no clear identity. But the genetic and linguistic evidence says the opposite. Filipino languages didn't borrow from Chinese. They developed independently from a common Austronesian ancestor. Filipino culture didn't copy from mainland Asia. It developed as part of a distinct maritime civilization that spread across the Pacific. We're not derivative. We're original. We're part of the Austronesian expansion, one of the most successful human migrations in history. Knowing this changes everything. It means when Filipinos created barangay boats and sailed across oceans, we weren't copying Polynesians. We and Polynesians both inherited that knowledge from common ancestors. It means when Filipinos developed complex navigation systems, we weren't learning from Chinese sailors. We had our own indigenous knowledge base. It means Filipino culture isn't an imitation of Asian culture. It's a unique expression of Pacific Islander heritage. And it means Filipinos don't need to look to China, Japan, or Korea for validation. We have our own ancient, sophisticated, globally influential civilization. We're not Asia's little brother, we're the Pacific's explorers. The genetic studies keep coming. The 2021 study I mentioned at the beginning isn't the only one. Genetic research on Filipino populations is accelerating, and every new study confirms the same pattern. In 2016, a study published in Genome Biology analyzed ancient DNA from skeletal remains found in the Philippines. The remains dated back 2,000 to 3,000 years. The DNA matched Austronesian populations, not East Asian populations. In 2018, researchers discovered that Filipinos carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA in the world, genetic markers from an extinct human species that interbred with modern humans tens of thousands of years ago. Denisovan DNA is found primarily in Pacific Islander and Melanesian populations, not in East Asian populations. Again, the evidence points to Pacific Islander ancestry. In 2020, a study on the Aeta specifically found that they possess DNA lineages dating back 50,000 years, among the oldest continuous genetic lineages in Southeast Asia. They're not recent arrivals. They're the original inhabitants. Every genetic study that comes out reinforces the same conclusion. Filipinos are Austronesian Pacific Islanders, not East Asians. But this information hasn't reached mainstream Filipino consciousness yet. Because it's not taught in schools, it's not in textbooks, it's buried in academic journals that most people never read. That's changing. And this video is part of that change. What about Chinese Filipino mestizos? Now, some of you might be thinking, but I have Chinese ancestry. Does that make me Asian? Here's the thing, having some Chinese ancestry doesn't change your primary genetic identity. The Philippines has a long history of Chinese migration and intermarriage, especially in urban centers like Manila, Cebu, and Zamboanga. Some Filipino families have significant Chinese ancestry, but even Chinese Filipino mestizos are still majority Austronesian genetically. The Chinese component might be 20 to 30%, but the Austronesian component is still 70 to 80%. Culturally, Chinese Filipinos are Filipino. They speak Filipino languages. They practice Filipino customs. They identify as Filipino. Having some Chinese ancestry doesn't make you more Asian. It makes you Filipino with Chinese ancestry. Just like someone might be Hawaiian with Japanese ancestry or Samoan with European ancestry. The point is that Filipino as a baseline identity is Austronesian Pacific Islander. Any East Asian genetic components are additions to that baseline, not the primary identity. And for the vast majority of Filipinos, especially those from rural areas, from Visayas and Mindanao, from indigenous communities, the East Asian genetic component is minimal or non-existent. The core Filipino genetic identity is Austronesian. That's what the data shows, reclaiming Pacific Islander identity. So what does this mean practically? It means Filipinos should start identifying as Pacific Islanders, not Asian Pacific Islander, not Asian Pacific Islander. In the United States, there's a census category called Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander. Filipinos qualify for this category based on genetic and cultural heritage. Yet most Filipinos check Asian because that's what they've been taught. But imagine if Filipinos started claiming Pacific Islander identity. What would change? First, it would connect Filipinos to a broader Pacific Islander community. Hawaiians, Samoans, Tongans, Fijians, Marshallese, Chamorros. These are our genetic and cultural cousins. We share ancestors, we share language roots, we share boat technology and navigation knowledge. Second, it would challenge the model minority myth. Asian Americans are often stereotyped as academically successful, economically upward mobile, and politically passive. This stereotype erases the diversity of Asian experiences and ignores the struggles many Filipino Americans face. Pacific Islanders, by contrast, are recognized as an indigenous population with distinct needs, histories, and challenges. Claiming Pacific Islander identity would allow Filipinos to access resources and recognition specific to indigenous Pacific communities. Third, it would force a reckoning with Filipino history. If Filipinos are Pacific Islanders, then Spanish and American colonization wasn't the colonization of an Asian country. It was the colonization of a Pacific Island nation. That changes the narrative. That changes how we understand our history. Conclusion: the truth you deserve. For 500 years, colonizers have told Filipinos who we are. Spain said we were heathens who needed Christianity. America said we were Asians who needed democracy. The modern world says we're a mixed-up people with no clear identity. But the DNA says something different. The DNA says Filipinos are Austronesian Pacific Islanders, descendants of the greatest ocean voyagers in human history, part of a genetic and cultural family that spans from Madagascar to Easter Island. The DNA says we're not a derivative culture borrowing from China and India. We're an original culture that developed independently and spread across half the earth. The DNA says the Aeta aren't outsiders. They're the original Filipinos. And lowland Filipinos are their descendants, mixed with later migrations and some trade contact. The DNA says our languages, our boats, our navigation, our tattoos, our entire cultural foundation is Pacific Islander, not Asian. This isn't about rejecting Asia. Many Filipinos have trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and some genetic mixing with Asian populations. That's part of our history too. But it's not the primary identity. The primary identity is Austronesian Pacific Islander. And it's time Filipinos knew that. It's time we stopped checking Asian on forms and started checking Pacific Islander. It's time we stopped looking to China and Japan for validation and started looking to our Pacific Islander cousins, Hawaiians, Samoans, Tongans, who share our genetic heritage. It's time we honored the Aeta as the carriers of our ancestral DNA instead of marginalizing them. It's time we reclaimed the truth. You're not Asian, You're Austronesian, you're Pacific Islander. You're the descendant of ocean explorers who colonized half the Earth. The DNA proves it. The linguistics prove it. The archaeology proves it. The culture proves it. All that's left is for you to believe it.